three major moves are changing gaming at the same time, and together they raise one uncomfortable question about who the industry now serves. First, Microsoft is increasing Xbox console prices worldwide on August 1, 2026, even though the current hardware generation is already mature. Second, Xbox is cutting thousands of jobs and moving several acquired studios toward independence or new ownership after admitting its expansion produced weak returns. Third, Sony plans to stop physical disc production for all new PlayStation releases beginning in January 2028, pushing future buyers toward digital access. Together, these decisions create a clear comparison: corporate survival and efficiency on one side, consumer ownership, worker stability, and creative freedom on the other. Today, we will examine the numbers, the official explanations, the strongest counter-arguments, and the practical consequences before reaching a direct verdict. Before choosing a villain, we need to separate confirmed facts from emotional reactions, because outrage without evidence is merely advertising for the opposite side. Briefly, if you value gaming breakdowns that separate confirmed facts from corporate spin, support the video with a like. Subscribing also helps this channel keep examining what publishers announce, what they avoid mentioning, and who eventually pays the price. By the end, the answer should be clear: are publishers protecting a difficult business, or making customers and developers pay for leadership mistakes? Start with Xbox because its price increase is simple, measurable, and difficult to hide behind a cinematic trailer. Microsoft says 512GB consoles will cost $100 more, while 1TB models will increase by $150. Specifically, the company is also discontinuing its 2TB model, removing the largest official storage option while every remaining choice becomes more expensive. Previously, American Xbox prices had already risen by $20 to $70 in October 2025, depending on the model. Importantly, buyers are not receiving a new processor, faster graphics, larger memory, or any major feature that changes what these machines can do. Nothing about the console suddenly became next generation, yet the receipt now looks increasingly like one. That makes the consumer complaint reasonable. Xbox is asking more money for aging hardware while reducing storage flexibility. Supporters of Microsoft still have a legitimate argument, because console prices do not exist in a vacuum. Critics often forget that storage, memory, shipping, tariffs, currency movements, and manufacturing contracts can change long after hardware launches. Fairly considered, a company cannot keep selling every machine at the same price forever if production costs rise sharply. Component shortages can force painful decisions, especially when consoles already operate on smaller margins than many software businesses. Currency weakness can also turn a stable American price into a loss elsewhere, which helps explain worldwide adjustments. Supply problems therefore offer a credible business explanation, but explanation is not the same as proof that every increase is reasonable. However, Microsoft weakens its own defense, because the price announcement arrived beside a much larger admission about Xbox strategy. Timing matters here. Since only 11 days separated the console increase from the most significant restructuring in Xbox history. 11 days after customers learned they would pay more, employees learned that roughly 3,200 roles would disappear through fiscal year 27. Xbox said about 1,600 positions were being eliminated immediately, with additional reductions following during the year. According to the company's reset memo, the core business had weakened after aggressive expansion, heavier investment, and slower growth than leadership expected. Roughly translated, Xbox spent heavily to become larger, discovered that size did not guarantee profit, and then began shrinking. Management reported that the business lost 64 cents for every dollar invested during a typical year. Developers did not choose the acquisition strategy, approve corporate spending, or decide how many management layers Xbox needed. Workers did not promise that subscriptions, hardware, publishing, mobile growth, premium releases, and acquisitions would all succeed together. Players certainly did not authorize Microsoft to buy studios as proof of strength and later treat those purchases as excess weight. Executives made those decisions, so the fairest criticism belongs at the leadership level rather than with the people making games. Corporate language calls the process a reset, but ordinary employees experience that reset as lost income, interrupted projects, and uncertain careers. Another important detail prevents this from becoming a lazy anti-Microsoft rant. Xbox says its publicly announced first-party projects were not cancelled in this restructuring. Compulsion Games will return to its management and become independent, carrying its intellectual property, catalog, and support for future work. Double Fine Productions is following a similar path, leaving Xbox with its games, back catalog, and financial runway. Ninja Theory has entered terms to join new ownership, with funding intended to continue the next Senua project. Undead Labs is also moving toward new ownership with support for State of Decay 3. Arkane's French operation faces consultations about strategic options, adding uncertainty without proving that closure is inevitable. None of those outcomes automatically means creative disaster, because independence or new ownership can sometimes protect studios from a struggling parent company. Still, Microsoft originally presented studio ownership as evidence that Xbox had a powerful future, making these departures impossible to dismiss as routine housekeeping. Financially, the company may be correcting a bad structure before deeper losses damage every team. Strategically, selling or separating studios can reduce costs, shorten decision chains, and give individual developers more control. Creatively, however, constant ownership changes consume attention, disrupt leadership, delay hiring, and make long-term planning harder. Therefore, the balanced conclusion is not that restructuring is always wrong, but that leadership should carry responsibility when expansion fails. Sony presents a different version of the same conflict, replacing immediate price pressure with long-term control over access. Beginning in January 2028, physical disc production will end for all new games released on PlayStation consoles. Existing disc releases remain unaffected, and games launching before that date can still receive physical editions. Officially, Sony says consumer preferences are shifting toward digital media and that buyers increasingly choose downloads. Convenience supports that claim, because digital games require no store visit, no disc swapping, and no shelf space. Yet convenience explains why customers may select digital copies. It does not explain why the physical alternative must disappear. Discs allow people to lend games, resell them, buy used copies, give them away, collect them, and preserve them. Digital access places most of those freedoms behind platform rules, account systems, licensing terms, and continuing store support. Accounts can be hacked, suspended, mistakenly banned, or trapped in recovery systems that leave the buyer requesting access to purchases already made. Licenses can expire or change when agreements involving music, brands, actors, technology, or publishers end. Servers can close, removing authentication, multiplayer features, downloadable content, or sometimes the entire game. Updates can improve products, but they can also remove features, alter content, or make older versions difficult to preserve. EFF argues that ending physical releases moves gaming toward rent-only culture, weakens second-hand markets, and increases distributor control. Storage creates another problem because modern games can consume enormous portions of a console drive. Broadband access also remains unequal, meaning large downloads can take days or exceed household data limits. Families lose easy hand-me-downs when games cannot simply move from one shelf to another. Resale disappears when a license cannot legally or technically transfer to another buyer. Lending becomes controlled by account sharing rules instead of a simple exchange between friends. Preservation grows harder when the only usable copy depends on old servers, remote checks, and contracts that may vanish. Defenders of digital distribution answer that discs are not perfect ownership either, because many modern releases require patches, downloads, or online activation. Opponents also note that producing, shipping, stocking, and returning physical inventory creates costs and unsold waste. California's AB 1921 attempts to address the shutdown problem without requiring companies to manufacture discs forever. Under the amended proposal, covered games first sold or re-released from January 2028 would require 60 days of shutdown notice. Operators would need to explain the closing date, affected services, lost features, known security risks, and the remaining customer options. After support ends, companies would provide an independent version, a patch, server documentation or software, or a refund calculated under the bill. Crucially, the proposal is not law and should never be presented as though California has already settled digital ownership. Lawmakers passed it through the Assembly by 43 votes to 16, but a Senate committee later rejected advancement by 4 votes to 3. ESA, representing major game companies, argues that mandatory preservation could redirect limited money and staff away from new projects. Its concern deserves attention because online games may rely on moderation, licensed content, security systems, live economies, and complicated server infrastructure. Advocates respond that the bill does not demand permanent official servers because it allows several end-of-life options, including refunds. Technically, both sides have a point. Some games can receive an offline patch easily, while others would require expensive redesign. Smaller studios could face proportionally heavier compliance costs than Microsoft, Sony, or other giant publishers. Sensible legislation should therefore distinguish between simple authentication removal and massive online worlds built around continuous services. Honest storefronts could also display a guaranteed support period before purchase, giving consumers clear expectations without forcing endless operation. More transparency would let temporary online experiences exist while making their expected lifespan part of the buying decision. Viewed together, these stories reveal a business under pressure from rising costs, weak returns, expensive development, and changing buying habits. Hardware makers need sustainable margins, publishers need profitable games, and studios need enough investment to employ skilled teams. Employment cannot survive indefinitely inside a business that loses money, regardless of how strongly audiences value particular developers. Distribution will continue moving toward digital formats because customers often choose speed and convenience over physical storage. Policy should not pretend those economic realities are imaginary, because creativity cannot survive without functioning companies. Across the evidence, however, corporate survival repeatedly appears to require less protection for the people carrying the risk. Ultimately, customers face higher hardware prices, workers face layoffs, studios face ownership changes, and buyers face weaker control over purchased games. My verdict is that these companies have real financial problems, but their current solutions transfer too much cost and too little power downward. The industry is not wrong to restructure, raise prices, or adopt digital delivery when evidence supports those choices. So the final answer is not that every corporate decision is malicious, it is that the balance has moved too far against players and creators. Big gaming now wants customers paying more, workers accepting less stability, and everyone trusting platforms that retain the keys. Consequently, any serious recovery plan should protect investment without pretending that customers, developers, and preservation advocates must accept every loss while executives keep the authority that created the underlying strategy and approved its risks from above. This arrangement may protect quarterly survival, but without stronger ownership rights and clearer accountability, it will damage the long-term industry it claims to save.